plaza from the Comtuay North. And if you're the person who's also interested of these followings, aba, tama ka ng video na pinapanood kasi dito tatalakayin natin yung kanilang kultura, relihiyon at marami pang iba. Handa ka na ba? Di mo na lang naman ang kultura ng opa mo, pero aking super soju.
Welcome to Korea, land of the morning calm and the fragility of peace. We will tackle the history of Korea. Civilization on the Korean peninsula can be dated back to 4000 BC when the region was originally made up of tribes. Over the years, these people banded together to form kingdoms, and Korean history, similar to the Chinese, is broken down into the rule of these kingdoms. The Korean culture is one of the oldest continuous cultures in the whole wide world. Today, starker cultural differences exist in today's Korea, which has been split into North and South Korea. However, originally, this cultural and historical heritage was shaped quite identically across the entire Korean peninsula and even southern Korea. South and North Korea took dramatically different social, economic, and political paths following the end of fighting in the Korean War in 1953. Kilala mo ba sila? Di malamang, isa ka rin sa mga avid fan ng K-drama or K-movie o sabihin natin pati K-pop. Alamin natin ang kanilang kultura at iba pa. Korean culture comprises all of its history, customs, tradition, and beliefs. It has been shaped by each of its different dynasties, wars, changes in religious beliefs, the modernization of the world as a whole, and many other customs and traditions that have passed in between generations. Here are the 5 things that you need to know about the Korean culture. The spiritual ground and beliefs of Koreans are built mainly around the religions of Confucianism, Buddhism, and Christianity. Of these, especially Confucianism has a long record of influence in Korea, and its political and social philosophies can still clearly be seen in today's Korea. However, Buddhism and Christianity are also highly visible in society, where the Buddhist South Koreans account for 46% of the population, and a lot of the areas in South Korea that are listed as World Heritage Sites are Buddhist temples. Adopted as a state ideology of the Joseon Dynasty, Confucianism is more of a code of ethical conduct that emphasizes the importance of loyalty, filial piety, and ancestor worship. Based on the concepts of Confucianism, the Joseon Dynasty established a code of conduct to settle the manners and customs of the people's lives. It stresses the importance of Chong, the loyalty of subjects to their king, Hyo, filial, and the obedience of children to their parents, and Yol, duties between the husband and the wife. Catholicism was introduced to Korea during the late Joseon Dynasty period by diplomats who returned from China and Catholic priests who were invited by the Korean Christians. The early Roman Catholics in Korea were subjected to severe persecution, but the religion continued to spread among the people across the country. Protestantism was brought to Korea during the late Joseon Dynasty period and quickly won people's heart through school education and medical services. Even today, Protestants in South Korea operate a great number of educational institutes, middle and high school, college and universities, and medical centers. Still, shamanism has also played an important part in the daily life of the Korean people. Some believe shamans can predict their future or they can console the spirits of the deceased. Others visit fortune tellers when they start a business or get married.
That's it. That's for my vlog today. Those are the information of the brief introduction of cultural history of Korea and their religion. I still have friends who will continue to discuss the information that you need to know. And take notes because most of them are important and they will answer all the questions inside your head. So thank you for watching and I hope you learned something a lot today. And I encourage you enough to learn more about Korean and be more interested. Thanks again, Saranghae! 안녕하세요, Precious. For today's topic, I will share some basic words and phrases in Korean language that can be easily learned nowadays. We all know that Korean is also spoken in the large communities around the world, such as the US, Thai, Guam, Singapore, and Paraguay. The Korean speakers continue to increase because there are some countries like the Philippines where the Korean language is taught as a selective course. We all know that the whole country of Korea is divided into two: the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or the North Korea, and the Republic of Korea, which is the South Korea. The ancient Korean language is divided into two as well, namely Puyo, spoken in Manchuria and North Korea, and Han, spoken in South Korea. Today, I will teach you some phrases in Seoul dialect. It is one of the most popular languages among Southeast Asian because of the prevalence of Korean culture through Korean popular posts, Korean drama or movies, Korean music, or even Korean foods. So, let's start! Here are the list of the Korean phrases and here the list of their English meaning. So, let's start in 안녕하세요, 감사합니다 or 고마워요, 천만에요, 미안합니다 or 미안해, 네, 아니요, 괜찮아요. And if you encounter someone who speaks in Korean, or let's say Korean native, they would probably ask you, 한국말 하실 줄 아세요? 한국말 하실 줄 아세요? Or, do you speak Korean? But since you learned a lot from this video or from the movies that you have watched before, which is the Korean movies or Korean dramas, and you are also hooked with the Korean pop or Korean music, you would probably reply, 한국말을 조금 하시겠어요? 한국말을 조금 하시겠어요? Or, I can speak a little bit Korean. I hope you learned something from this video and it helps you a lot. 안녕!
Annyeong! Here's the 4 ways to say hello in Korea. Let's start with the formal way. Number 1 is 안녕하세요. It's not 안녕하세요 because it's like you're rapping. It's 안녕하세요. And the second one is 안녕하십니까. 안녕하십니까. And second is saying it in the formal way. It's just like this. 안녕. And the last one is when you're having a phone call. It's just like this. 여보세요? And here are the other greetings that is used commonly in Korea. Hashtag Korean no.
안녕하세요. 저는 아렌입니다. 반가워. Today I'm about to discuss some of the prominent words in Korea, as well as their communication style, traditions and rituals, and Korean family members. And without further ado, let's start. Korean prominent words. Here I have prepared some examples of the most important, well-known or remarkable phrases in Korea like this.
안녕하세요, 별핑크입니다.
유연아 안녕.
But other than greetings, I also prepare some words that they use in everyday life. It is for us as well to learn the basics of their language. Let's start with the basics of saying hello in Korean. Korean greets each other by saying 안녕하세요. You say this while slightly nodding your head if the person is around the same age as you. If the person you are talking to is much older, make sure you bow down lower to show your respect. 저기요, or excuse me. You may use this Korean phrase to attract the attention of the servers to get the menu, order your food, or pay the bill. 네 or yeah. This is the easiest way to say yes in Korean. Just use it formal situations such as between teacher and a student, business partners, or strangers. 아니요 or no. You can use this word to all people and it will be considered polite. 먹자. The most used version for how to say let's eat in Korean is 먹자. It is not really a greeting but an important word nonetheless. 죄송합니다, which is the formal way to say sorry in Korean. 감사합니다 or thank you. There are many ways to say thank you in Korean, but the safest and the common phrase is 감사합니다. Again, slightly nodding your head while saying this greeting in Korean conveys your respect for the recipient. 아니요. It can be used to say you're welcome in Korean. Literally means it's not or it's nothing, or no problem. 사랑해요. 사랑해요 is the respectful and polite way to say I love you in Korean. This is how you would usually tell your parents and teachers that you love them and also to express gratitude for what they do. 아름다워요. It is beautiful. There are two ways to say beautiful in Korean. The first way is to use the word 아름답다. The second way is to use the word 예쁘다, which means pretty. These words generally can be both used interchangeably. 귀여워요. It is cute. In Korean. 맛있어요. It is delicious. You saying 맛있어요 to talk about what you are eating is delicious. Whiting. This is commonly used by Korean to say go go or cheering one another. 좋은 아침이에요 or good morning. 잘 자요 or good night. 안녕히 계세요 or goodbye. Not only must we be familiar with these forms of greetings, but we must also be familiar with some of their swearing or foul language like this.
봐봐, 이렇게 봐. 이런 X발 같네. 가자. 이런 X발 같네.
야.
뭐 해봐. 빨리 해봐. 이런 X발 같네. 아, 참. 야, 병수야, 이거 제대로 해야지. 이런 X발 같네.
Byungshin. Jilal. Gesakgi. Sangwan Hajima. Daicheo. Even if it seems meaningless to us Filipinos to hear that, still, these are cuss words with meaning. Next will be the communication style in Korea. Communication in Korea is thongsin. The verbal communication in Korea is gudo thongsin. First is the indirect communication. The South Korean communication pattern is generally indirect and quiet verbose. They tend to rely less on words and are attentive to a speaker's posture, expression, and tone of voice to draw meaning. Speech can be ambiguous as they often understate their point. The purpose of this is to maintain harmony throughout the conversation and prevent a loss of face on either end of the exchange. The best way of navigating this rhetoric to find the underlying meaning is to check for the clarification several times through open-ended questions. Refusals. A South Korean's preoccupation with saving face and politeness means that they will seldom give a flat no or negative response, even when they don't
진지야.
agree with you.
맛있어? 언니 한 입만. 여기 있네, 여기 그대로 있네.
Therefore, focus on hints of hesitation, listening to what they say, but also paying careful attention to what they subtly imply. Speech style. While they may be indirect in their communication style, South Koreans generally speak quite firmly and use less gestures and facial expressions. This can make them come across as stern. Expect them to give a serious replies and reports. They also tend to ask questions in order to discern their status in comparison to the person they are talking to. This can catch people off guard. Like, how much do you earn? Or how old are you? Silence. Silence is an important and purposeful tool used in Asian communication. Pausing before giving a response indicates that someone has applied appropriate thought and consideration to the question. It reflects politeness and respect. Laughter. Laughter is sometimes used in awkward situations. A Korean may laugh when they feel uncomfortable and not necessarily because what was said was genuinely funny. Next is the nonverbal communication or bienwisasoton. In nonverbal communication, we have the physical contact. Koreans are generally not very physically affectionate with one another. However, male friends may touch one another more than Western men, and girls may walk hand in hand. Personal space. Personal space is not guarded very closely in Korea. People generally expect to come into contact with strangers on busy streets and tend to not worry or apologize when personal space is invaded. Pointing. People do not point with their index finger but rather with their entire hand. Eye contact. During a discussion or friendly conversation, make full eye contact with the person you are talking to. Avoid direct eye contact if you are scolded or rebuked by someone older or of a higher status than you. Some Koreans may also avoid eye contact with their superiors on a regular basis. Hands. Use two hands or your right hand alone to offer or receive something. Gestures. It is considered rude to make a fist with your hand while placing the thumb between the middle and the index finger. Expressions. Koreans tend to come across as a quiet, straight-faced in conversation. However, their facial expressions can immediately expose when they are angry or in disagreement. Smiling. As well as an expression of glee and humor, smiling can indicate that one is feeling ashamed or embarrassed in Korean culture. For example, a Korean may smile when they make a mistake.
뭐하냐?
이거 아니야?
Sneezing. Sneezing is considered rude in Korea. It is best practice to excuse yourself from the room if you have to. And now, let's proceed to their traditions and rituals. One of the most well-known traditions in Korea is their wedding ceremony. Matchmaking with the help of matchmakers, or yuhwon. Wedding parade on a pony. Bowing to the members of the family, or kyobarye. Couple drinking from the same cup, or hapgulye. And bridal procession, or ugwi. These are major rituals of a traditional Korean marriage. And of course, We have the traditional clothes of Korea that is the pride of Korean people. The most iconic Korean outfit is the hanbok, worn by both men and women. Its name is short for Hanguk Boksik or Korean clothing. The hanbok can be recognized on murals or Goguryeo dynasty tombs painted nearly 1600 years ago. The hanbok has a history as colorful as its garment. It was worn daily up until about a century ago. However, it remains an important part of a Korean culture, with people wearing it on special occasions and holidays.
안녕하세요! And now let's learn about the basics of the South Korean family values. First, it is part of every life in South Korea culture to use bowing. Any social interactions, either formal or casual occasions, they often involves bowing. Second, in South Korea, drinking is part of their culture and you should never pour your own drink. You'll be pouring for someone else's drink and they'll return the favor to you. And the most important thing is to use your two hands when you pour for someone else. Third, Korean loves to drink soju. And when someone poured a drink for you, make sure to turn away and don't look to the person who poured the drink for you. Because if you do, it will be considered rude. Fourth, be careful with your chopsticks. Try to keep your chopsticks pointed down at your food or towards your mouth. Fifth, don't lick your fingers while eating. Sixth, it is very important that you wait the oldest person to start the dinner first before you eat. So don't pick up your utensils yet. 7. Many restaurants in South Korea have a traditional floor tables with no chairs. And if you see a shoe rack by the entrance of the houses or in any restaurants, then you should take your shoes off. And that's it. I hope you learned something and please take note all of this because I believe that you can use this especially when you visit South Korea. Thank you for listening. 안녕히 계세요.
Tada! Annyeong! Here I am again for hashtag Korean Knows. And what are you seeing right now is kimchi. Yes, you're right. I know that some of you is very familiar with this, especially when you're a fan of K-dramas, Korean foods, or anything about Korean, especially to this one, because it is one of the basic food in Korea. But for today's episode, I'm not going to talk about the cuisines, but instead, the things that you must know in dining in Korea. So, here's the top 11 dining etiquettes, practices, and beliefs that you must know before you go to Korea or eat with the Koreans. So, let's go! Anong tourist tayo? Magka-teleport ako. Charot, nandito pa ako. Korean dining etiquette is the most important thing that you must consider when you travel to South Korea. Because having a bad manner in any country is definitely the impression that you don't want to make. So, here's Trisha Chingo to help you, to give you tips and advices when you going to Korea. Ana, don't forget to say "잘 먹겠습니다" to the one who prepares the food, to cook the food, or taste the food. Because this means that I will enjoy the food and it shows respect to them and it is a very big deal to them. Okay? Remember the rank. The youngest that we're going to eat in Korea will be seated near at the door. And also, when the oldest member is going to sit, then that's the time that all of the members can also sit. Because they are very respectful to the elders. That's why most of the etiquettes in Korea is very in favor with the elders. And wait for the oldest person to leave his or her utensils first or to take his or her first bite and the food before you could eat. Especially when you are the youngest and the guests or members of the family, because when you do that, when you eat first, then it shows this respect to them. Because as we can see, Koreans are very respectful to their elders and that's good. So, if you are the oldest, the one to eat in the dining, then don't be shy to lift your utensils first, especially when you're really hungry, right? So, in Korean food, there's shared food. This is the shared food. In shared food, do not ever poke with it, dig with it, or grab the whole food because it shows disrespect to the Koreans. But instead, just take a little amount of it, like this one. Like for example, this is the shared food, then you're just going to take small. That's all. When eating food in Korean, like soups with noodles or any kind of food, do not slurp, do not make loud noises when eating because it really shows disrespect to them. Unlike in China, that when you eat loud, then it indicates that you really enjoy the food because it's yummy. But in Korea, it's a very no-no. Yasan. This etiquette is very common not just in Korea, but also in our country and maybe in other country. Yeah, that when you eat, you must not use your phones or anything that may distract you from eating. And also, even if you finish your food, don't leave the table while everyone is still eating because it shows disrespect to their go. No lifting. What do I mean by that? If there is soup or a bowl of rice in the table, don't ever lift them up because it shows disrespect to them. Instead, just put it on the table and use chopsticks or spoon to eat it or drink the soup. Yoga. When eating, do not use your bare hands, but instead use the spoon and the chopsticks, but not in the same hand. Do not do like this one. It's a no-no. Use your both hands while eating. Oh, like in Japan, do not ever stick the chopsticks in the rice because this is to be done when honoring the dead. Okay, so don't ever do that. So, when you eat, you must have a good posture. Do not do like this. Or anything that is, you're not in a good posture. Because it shows disrespect to them and they may feel like that you're not enjoying the food or disrespecting the one who prepared it. Unlike in our country that you can eat in any sitting positions that we like. Sometimes our both is on a table or anything else. But we have different kinds of etiquette in our country, so don't do that. Okay. Yun na. After you eat, don't forget to say the word "감사합니다," which means I ate well. Because they really appreciate it, especially when they are the ones who prepare the food, cooks the food, or taste the food. So don't forget to say it to make them feel that you appreciate the food that you prepare. Okay? Actually, there are so many etiquettes, practices, and beliefs inside Korea when it comes to in dining. But what I have discussed is the most important and basic things that you must know when you're going to Korea and with the Koreans or your Korean friends, or when you're going to the family of your Korean boyfriend. Char.
Kung bibitaw ng mahinahon ako pa.
I hope that you enjoy and learn from me. So, this is your teacher Chiku. 감사합니다. And see you next week on Hashtag Korean Notes. Bye! Bye-bye!
나의 두 눈을 감으면 떠오르는
It's me, Tisha, your Chingo for hashtag Korean Knows. Our last vlog is about the dining, etiquettes, beliefs, and practices that you must consider when you go to Korea. And for today's vlog, we are going to talk about work, beliefs, practices, and etiquettes in Korea that you must consider if you want to work in Korea someday. Especially when you're going to find oppa. Cheers! So, without further ado, let's say, let's go! Anna, it's about hierarchy. What do I mean by that? Because Koreans are very strict, self-disciplined, and hardworking kind of persons. That's why they are very strict with boss and employee relationships, which means that employees must know their limitations when it comes in interacting with their bosses. They must know how to respect and have a self-discipline even if they are close with their bosses. Like for example, when you greet them, it is not annyeong. It must be annyeonghaseyo. Because it is more formal and respectful if you use that. Okay? Good. Korea is one of the countries with most highest working hours. So, it's about 11 hours to 16 hours per day when they work. So, working overtime is very normal to them. And their overtime sometimes is not paid, but also it's normal for them. Drinking a lot after work, small celebrations or any kind of celebration in company is very common in Korea when it comes to work.
김미소는 남친구랑 뭐 건데?
Because they think that when they drink with their co-workers, it can gain trust and bond with the other co-workers of them. And if you refuse to come with them in work celebration, then they might think that you're not good or you don't want to be with them. And that's a no-no. So if I were you, then you must come with them. Not just drink moderately. So they drink Monday to Saturdays. Yeah. And it's very normal to them. Just like what we see in Korean dramas, it's 100% real. They do it. They get used to it. When giving business cards, you must not use just your one hand. Like this. It is a no-no for Koreans because it shows disrespect. But instead, you must use your two hands and giving it. Just like this. Here are the other work etiquette, beliefs and practices in South Korea.
Hey Austin. Hi. What you doing? Hey Austin. What you doing? Oh, I got from Blueberry Pop. You want one? Take more if you want. Oh, it's hard.
different work etiquettes, work beliefs and practices. And the thing that we must do is to respect it because it's a part of each country's culture. Especially if you have a plan to work abroad or anywhere that you wanted, you must really consider the rules and regulations, the people there, and just adopt on the pace. Because it will enable you becoming a part of that community. And if you're having a hard time to adopt on that new place because the environment is different to our place, then it's okay because you're still learning and everything has been processed because there's no easy way at first, right? So, good luck to you. Fighting!
나의 두 눈을 감으면 떠오르는 그 눈동자
안녕하세요, 마크입니다. Today, I'm going to be discussing with you the education system, the government system, and the environment of South Korea. Without further ado, let's start the discussion. Let us now go ahead and discuss about the education system of South Korea. The Korean public education structure is divided into 3 parts. 6 years of primary school, followed by 3 years of middle school, and then 3 years of high school. Now, we are going to dissect each part, starting off with primary school. The primary curriculum consists of 9 principal subjects such as moral education, Korean language, social studies, mathematics, science, physical education, music, fine arts, and practical arts. The major objectives of the primary curriculum, as stated in a 1996 background report by the Ministry of Education, are to improve basic abilities, skills, and attitudes, to develop language ability and civic morality needed to live in society, to increase the spirit of cooperation, to foster basic arithmetic skills and scientific observation skills, and to promote the understanding of healthy life and the harmonious development of body and mind. After completing primary school, students will then advance to the second part, which is the middle school. Middle school comprises grades 7 through 9, and this curriculum consists of 12 basic or required subjects, electives, and extracurricular activities. Moving on to the third part, which is the high school level. High school is divided into academic and vocational schools. In fact, in 1995, 62% of students were enrolled in academic high school and 38% of them are enrolled in vocational high schools. A small number of students attended specialized high school, concentrating in science, the arts, foreign languages, and other specialized fields, which is still the case up until now. The aims of education at the high school level are stated as to foster each student's personality and ability needed to preserve and strengthen the backbone of the nation, to develop students' knowledge and skills to prepare them for jobs needed in society, to promote each student's autonomy, emotional development, and critical thinking abilities to be brought to bear in and out of school, and to improve physical strength and foster a sound mind. After discussing their education system, let us now move on and discuss about their environment. South Korea, specifically Seoul, is usually described as having a continental climate with distinct seasons. Its climate consists of warm and humid summers and short, dry, and cold winters. According to MyKoreans 2016, Seoul is currently facing several significant issues of air pollution which negatively affects the air quality, water pollution, industrial effluent, and high greenhouse gas emissions. These factors combined all raise concerns over the environmental accountability of Seoul, South Korea. Seoul's annual precipitation and temperature have been increasing continuously, and the rate of temperature increase is the greatest in Seoul compared to the rest of South Korea between 1912 to 2008. Moreover, such a continuous increase in temperature would then increase the city's energy consumption and waste disposal. The ongoing urbanization and population growth would then create a negative cycle that deteriorates both the city's air and water quality. As urbanization is positively correlated with the overall climate change of Seoul, this could in turn cause a series of environmental problems such as increased flood risks, air pollution, etc. Now, given those risks, the government of Seoul has made plans to install water tanks, permeable pavements, and ecological waterways to minimize such risk for its citizens. Apart from preventing the possible hazard posed by climate change, the Seoul government has shown a positive attitude towards enacting plans and methods to tackle climate change, such as expanding renewable energy. After discussing about their education system and their environment, let us now go ahead and discuss about their government. But before we dive deeply into their government system, let me first introduce to you their president, which is Moon Jae-in. He is the 12th elected president of South Korea and he was elected since 2017. He's a lawyer and a politician. Just like the Philippines, South Korea's government is also centralized democratic republic together with the three primary branches of government, which are executive, legislative, and judicial. The president acts as the head of the state and is the highest figure of authority in the country, followed by the prime minister and government ministers in decreasing order. The executive and legislative branches operate primarily at the national level, although various ministries in the executive branch also carry out local functions. Local governments are semi-autonomous and contain executive and legislative bodies of their own. The judicial branch operates at both the national and local levels. The South Korean government structure is determined by the Constitution of the Republic of Korea. This document has been revised several times since its first promulgation in 1948. However, it has retained many broad characteristics except for the short-lived Second Republic of South Korea. The country has always had a relatively independent chief executive in the form of a president. As with most stable three-branch systems, a careful system of checks and balances is in place. For an instance, the judges of Constitutional Court are partially appointed by the executive and partially by the legislature. Likewise, when a resolution of impeachment is passed by the legislature, it is sent to the judiciary for final decision. So those are all the information I have for you. Once again, this is Mark. 감사합니다. 안녕.
Hello guys, I'm Jaran and for today's video is ipapakita ko yung mga karaniwang sinusuot or clothes, cuisine, arts and crafts ng South Korea. And let's start. First one is the hanbok. Hanbok is the traditional clothes ng South Korea at kadalasan natin nakikita sa K-drama at kung paano ito suotin at dadalhin. And it is one of the most famous or fashion style in the world and has been beloved for almost 2,000 years. I have here the example of hanbok.
그대를 바라볼 때면 모든 게 멈추죠. 언제부턴지 나도 모르게였죠. 어느 날 꿈처럼 그대 다가와 내 맘을 흔들죠. 운명이란 걸 나.
At kadalasan itong sinusuot sa mga occasions, mga anniversary, and even sa wedding. When it comes to men's hanbok, it composed of got or yung hat nila, then durumagi which is the traditional overcoat or the jacket and pants, and last is the kochin or yung silk shoes nila. For women naman is yung jojori or yung nasa upper part ng hanbok. Next is dongjong which is yung white collar na nasa neckline. Next is yung otgoryum or yung cloth string. Then last is yung kima or the outer skirt. Next one is the turtleneck. Turtleneck sweaters are in again these days. According to fashion industry, most of the celebrities nowadays are spotted or wearing this kind of clothes, which is the turtleneck sweater. Next is the formal and casual. It is conservative of dark suits, shirts, and tie. It's very much norm in South Korea. With smart business suits and dresses favored by women. Next is that is in jacket. And since most of the time, winter sa kanila, ito yung unang kailangan para hindi sila mag-chills at magkasakit. Next category is the arts and crafts. First is the hanji. Hanji is the Korean paper and it is a precious cultural heritage ng South Korea at pinakamatagal na or famous din sa kasaysayan ng South Korea. Isa sa mga examples ng product using hanji is yung lamp katulad nito and water lantern for their wishes. Next is the calligraphy, also known as soye, is the Korean tradition of artistic writing calligraphy in Korean culture. It involves both of Hanja, Hangul, but early Korean calligraphy was exclusive in Hanja. Next category is the cuisine or yung mga foods na kilala hindi lamang sa South Korea, maging sa iba't iba pang bansa. And these are the example of cuisine. First is one and only samgyeopsal na talagang patok simula pandemic hanggang ngayon and halos lahat ng Pilipino ay gustong masubukan ito. But first, what is samgyeopsal in South Korea? It is a South Korean delicacy consisting only of pork belly or the most expensive cut of pork in the country. The resident eat it approximately once every 4 days. The name of the dish consists of 3 words which is sam or 3. Gyop means layered and sal means meat. The dish is most accompanied by lettuce, raw garlic, green chili peppers, kimchi, and green onions. Second is the tteokbokki. It is a chewy at street food with sweet, spicy, and savory flavor. Tteokbokki as a savory mochi cake or potato gnocchi mix with a spicy relish. Take note guys, if mahilig kayo sa mga maaanghang, and go for it. Third is japchae. It is a mixture of vegetable and japchae describe both the dish as well as the method with which it is prepared. Generally, the term refers to the vegetable or namul, stir-fried with meat to make the dish. Last, noodles made from sweet potato starch. Fourth is the jajangmyeon. It is a noodle dish in a black bean sauce along with a jampong spicy seafood noodle soup. It is the dish where the parents treated their child with a special occasion, such as graduation, exam days, birthdays, and etc. In South Korea, it was very child's favorite food. Fifth is the bibimbap. Sometimes it's romanized as a bibimba or bibimbap. It is a Korean rice dish. The term bimbim means mixing rice, while the bap is refers to the rice. It is served as a bowl of warm white rice topped with enamel and kimchi. As is the kimchi. It is the traditional Korean side dish of salted and fermented vegetable such as napa cabbage and Korean dish. A wide selection of seasoning are used, including spring onion, garlic, ginger. Kimchi is also used in variety of soups, and we are very familiar with this because it's spreading all over the world.